Okay, so normally these units have a couple of bolts on the bottom to adhere them to a desk or a table mount. What we needed to do with this little fella was we needed to get him on a pipe mount so that it would hang from the studio racking. So I took the bottom off, and then I also took, there was a little card slot in the bottom. I took that out because the card slot bolts right up to here. You can see how close that would be to where my target was. And then I drilled a huge hole through here and mounted a clamp to it. So the clamp, instead of using the two 1/4-inch tripod socket holes on either side, the clamp just bolts right straight through here. This will hook onto one of our studio pipes, and then I'll run the safety chain up and over, and I have a receiver for the safety chain for the other side, so we can clip that together. So you basically run your safety chain over it, and that way if for some reason somebody forgets to tighten this, then you've got that. So I took this daughter card out because the cards for these cameras are no longer being sold. This camera's a few years old, that's why we're using this. This was for the USB option. Unfortunately, you can't find that card anymore, so off to the pile you go. And that'll also allow me to put a wrench in through this card slot hole if I need to, and ever loosen that up. Like if for some reason we discover that we want to have this toward the front instead of toward the back, we can always just rotate it 180 or off to the side. It doesn't really matter. But we have access to that, and it won't come close enough to the electronics in there to damage anything. So this particular camera only has one port that's utilized, although you can't read any of the things that are on here right now. It's that little fella right there. And the rest of the stuff we really don't use. Like the HDMI we don't use because this goes back to a subunit. And that unit, like this right here, let me get around to the other side of it, takes the input from the camera, and then you can take the output from that. So you can take your DVI out, and you can convert that to HDMI or VGA or whatever you want to do. This camera can actually, it can be hooked up a number of different ways, but that way you only have one small thin Ethernet cable going up to your camera, and that supplies the power and everything else that you need. And pan and tilt's operated by the remote control. And you can see this is the card slot. So if I took this off, you would see that slot that's inside. But there's your RS-232, so you could hook this up if you had a controller, which we do not have. So we're only going to be using the setup with just the Ethernet coming out of it. So it'll make it easy to move it around if we need to move it to a different pipe. So I'm gonna put this little puppy back together, and then we'll end up moving it into the studio. In case you're wondering what the safety chain's for, so if this was the pipe, this is your safety chain. If for some reason you didn't tighten that bolt in enough, that's gonna save it from landing on somebody's head. It's not super heavy, but it's heavy enough where you don't want this thing on your noggin. And you can see in here that I still have enough room to reach that nut with a wrench if we need to. And now I'm just going to put the cover on this, and we'll be done with the installation. Pretty good. And that's going to get mounted in the studio. By the way, these dip switches on the back, number 6, is for the camera to be inverted. So right now, like if this was to be mounted this way, number 6 would have to be up. So because it's going to be hanging down from a pipe, that's why we have that inverted. So here I am in the studio, and have you seen the camera yet? Let me get a more clear shot for you. Boom, there we go. So that's what the mount looks like, and this ought to be pretty handy because there's an Ethernet cable that runs up and over the pole. And then that heads back into the studio area. And in the studio area, we can combine that with the other camera, which is in the back room up on the wall. I can actually show you that one too. All right, so this is our other camera. And this one you can see the cable that's hooked up to this one. And then we can join all of these lines together on the other end because it's got HDMI out. and we can either send that into just a separate recorder so that we can use it for whatever we're planning on using that for, or we could actually feed that into the board and you could make it part of the production. So if you wanted to see what was going on out in the studio space and you also wanted to see what's going on behind the scenes here, you could do that all at the same time. So we're getting there little by little.